Shalom and Happy New Year, friends. Victoria Sarvati here. I've got a wonderful just update and sort of a semi-teaching on Tu B'Shvat because it is coming up very soon. Actually, Tu B'Shvat means simply the 15th of Shavat, the month of Shavat, the Hebrew month in the winter time of the calendar. It basically is a time where it's a New Year's Day for trees. Just like we have our New Year's Day to commemorate, a fiscal year, or in Hebrew, they have the biblical New Year as well. There's also a New Year for the trees. And so this New Year for the trees is based on the fact that the trees have a cycle. In Leviticus 19, 23 and 24, it says, when you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, don't eat the fruit for 3 years, consider it inedible. By the 4th year, its fruit is holy, an offering of praise to God. That's in Leviticus. And so how do you start counting how old a tree is, especially if you don't know when it was planted? Well, on Tu B'Shvat, if the tree is above the ground, then you count it as, if it's a new tree above the ground, you count it as a year old. If it is not above the ground and it comes up above the ground after Tu B'Shvat in that year, then you have to wait until the next Tu B'Shvat to assume that it's a year old. So if it's not above the ground at Tu B'Shvat, it doesn't count. When it is above the ground, it doesn't count as a year until the next year. So this is how they determine the age of a tree. So it's the cycle of plant life begins with Tu B'Shvat. And also, what's interesting about Tu B'Shvat, it's usually the coldest day of the year. It's right smack dab in the middle of winter when everything is dead. But what happens when everything is dead? Jesus actually said it in John 12:24. It says, I tell you the truth, a grain of wheat must fall into the ground and die to make many seeds. The seeds at around Tu B'Shvat, the time of Tu B'Shvat, break. They break open from the frozen ground or just the coldness or just the dormancy of the seed. They break open and they begin to proliferate, to come forth with a plant or with more seeds. So it's very interesting that Jesus used this metaphor of a physical seed going into the ground, dying, breaking forth, and then from that broken seed, a new plant springs up from the ground, just like he went into the grave broken and he comes up resurrected, the firstborn of the dead, or the first fruit from the ground. So all of this is connected in the Hebrew understanding, but we're going to take this idea Tu B'Shvat and understand what's happening underground is a miracle. The seed going into the ground and breaking apart is a miracle from God. It says in 1 Corinthians 3:6, Paul says, I planted, talking about the seeds of the gospel, and Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. God makes it grow. So it's this miracle of the seed, God creating this miraculous plant or some type of living thing that comes from the ground that produces more seeds and provision for man that only he could actually create. Man has tried to reproduce seed, but the seeds are sterile. They only grow for that one season, and then there's nothing in the seed that produces more. It says in Scripture that it says, as we come, hold on. It says, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the entire earth, every tree that has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. The key is here, a seed yielding seed, fruit yielding seed. And a GMO or a man-made seed does not yield more seed. And so that's the difference. There's the miracle in that the seed yields more seed. And of course, God has got that arena covered, and man cannot do the things that he cannot be God, in other words. All right, well, Jesus also said concerning the seed that's broken forth, He said, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." And a lot of people have used this scripture, and I am working, as something that is maybe an argument against the Sabbath, which is really crazy because God gave it to man, for resting and for replenishing. And so, but what does it mean that God is working? God is working underground. There is something that's happening. It says in Genesis that he created creation in 6 days, and then he rested so that it itself could produce. And so there's this so that of God continuing to work his miracles really by a spoken word, that the constant creation is going from the very beginning. He created the seed, and that seed creates, and it creates, and it creates. So it itself is producing. It itself, creation, is creating. So we have this miraculous cycle, this miraculous means by which God creates provision for us. And I want to kind of argue a bit on the, arguing against Sabbath. To God, a day, or to us, a day is like 1,000 years. And when you consider that about 6,000 years ago, Adam was created, God has been working for 6,000 years. And so when Jesus said this 2,000 years ago, he said that my Father is working until now, even till now, and I am working. Yeshua was working too. What? Working out our redemption, working out the means by which the Spirit can work with us. He's praying with us. He's praying for us. He is working within our lives to answer prayer and to create his plans and purposes to continue in the direction they're supposed to continue in order to reach his ultimate purpose, and that is to bring his kingdom to earth. And guess when that happens? It happens on his 7th day. And so we enter into that 7th day rest, which is the 7,000th year since creation. So he will rest on his 7th day. And since God is outside of time, he's already there. So that's very interesting. We'll decline that for a second. That's my daughter calling me. All right, so let's go back to the idea that when we come to the end of the era, Yeshua will be then sitting on the throne, and it will be that rest for him in that 1,000-year millennium, that 7,000th year, or the 7th day. In the idea that a day is like 1,000 years. Okay, so God said, let's focus back on the miraculous provision of food from the earth. God said, "Behold, I've given you every plant." So when we have this basic understanding that God has given us this provision, this food, and there's this double meaning of Yeshua being the seed that promises and proliferates righteousness within us and within man, and how we continue that the effort of bringing in the harvest and bringing souls to salvation. We also must realize that there is a tendency sometimes to have a hardness of heart, and sometimes the seed, there's a hardness around the seed, and it doesn't grow, it doesn't break. If the seed doesn't break, then there is really no fruit. So what's around that seed? Well, the rabbis call it a klipot in Hebrew, but it's a hardening of the seed. And so we are asking God to not allow our hearts to be hardened. And so many things can harden us. Experiences and resentment and anger and things judgments that we put on others can cause a hardening of heart, where we won't even want to listen to God or even pray or even have any part in any part of God's kingdom. We tend to want to just harden our heart and stay away. But God is saying that he wants to break our hearts, just like the seed is broken, because whenever the heart is broken, then the seeds of righteousness will come forth out of you, and you will be able to do great things for God's kingdom. We celebrate God's provision, the miracle of seeds. There are 7 species that he created on this earth that are traditionally celebrated for this New Year time demarcation. The 7 species are actually memorialized and listed in Deuteronomy 8:8. I'm going to read this to you. For Adonai your God is bringing you into a good land. This is whenever the children of Israel are coming into the land he promised. A land with streams and springs and water welling up from the depths and valleys and hillsides. It's a land of wheat and barley, grapevines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food in abundance and lack nothing in it, a land where the stones contain iron. These are minerals, rich minerals to grow the food and to make the soil fertile, and the hills can be mined for copper. So you will eat and be satisfied, and you will bless Adonai, your God, for the good land he has given you. Such a wonderful scripture and reminder that God has given us such a gift in the food that we eat, the very things that are on our plate. We must remember to always give thanks to God and glorify him for his provisions. Now, these foods that we're going to be celebrating at Tu B'Shvat that are traditionally, I just mentioned them in this last scripture. I'll go ahead and highlight that again. It says wheat and barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and honey, date honey. Those are what science calls today superfoods. They're extremely nutritious, high in minerals, high in antioxidants, anti-cancer, a food that increases your vitality and regulates your blood sugar. They're miraculous foods. And what's really interesting about these foods, they're extremely satiating, which is why these foods are great to incorporate in an appetite suppressing diet. Now, we have just come off the holidays, and believe me, I know I have as well as you, because I just know I've seen you guys eat during the holidays. And we have a good time, don't we? We have all kinds of wonderful parties and celebrations for Hanukkah and Christmas, and we have birthday parties, and it's just like the month is just so filled with celebrations, right? Well, we've eaten a lot of things that really we need to get out of our system, and we need to hit a reset button. And this is a perfect time to do it. I feel like this is the timing of Tu B'Shvat, coming off the holidays. You got January to finish up your cookies, get rid of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and start February off in a healthy way. And let's get rid of some of those pounds, which is very interesting. These foods actually not only suppress and satiate the appetite, but they help you lose weight, because when you eat these foods, it puts you in what is called ketosis. They're higher in fat and lower in carbs. You are in basically very low carb diet. It's called a low net carb diet. I'll explain about this diet next week, but right now I just want to let you know that we do, as a body, work together and incorporate this new idea of the 7 species into our diet and eliminate all of those goodies that we enjoyed during the holidays. So I'll be explaining next week. We won't be fasting, but we'll be fasting carbs. Let's put it that way. Bad carbs. We'll be eating good carbs, and we'll be limiting our carbs to just a 50 net carb diet, which is very easy to do, especially when you're eating foods like all the eggs you want, all the meat you want, all the salads you want. It's even mayonnaise and some of these things are okay. It's the main thing is sugars and mostly the baked goods. You can have some barley and wheat, which is celebrated, but there is a net carb wheat bread that I recommend, Hero bread. I'll talk more about it next week, but it tastes good. It's got seeds in it, and you won't even know you're missing the bad bread, okay? So really, you don't even really know that you're on a real strict kind of diet, strict in the sense that you're limiting your carbs. And it works. Most people, when they get into ketosis, lose anywhere from a half a pound to a pound a week. And most people that join us on this little excursion of deviating from the regular bad diet that we have every year lose around 8 to 15 pounds. And I know I do every year. Kind of gain some of it back because we tend to go back to our own, idea of what we think we want to eat. And if we would just stay with this diet, I know some people who have and have continued to keep that weight off. So ketosis is a good thing, because you are burning up fat instead of your sugar that is in your system. So let's talk about more of that next week whenever we discuss the actual diet, and we'll explain how this corporate body will be entering into God's blessing, his blessed provisions, and we'll have a special cleansing of our system at the same time. So get ready. We're going to have a great time starting on the 13th of February is the date. Tu B'Shvat in the Gregorian calendar is 13th of February. So we have just a few more weeks, and then we're going to get healthy, guys. God bless you. We'll see you next week.